The lights flare to life, harsh, white, unflinching. Cameras swivel. A low murmur ripples through the packed chamber like static before a storm. At the center, Jasmine Crockett sits still, the eye of it all. Across from her, Justice Jackson leans back in his chair. Every gesture rehearsed, every smirk deliberate. The moderator's voice echoes, "Congresswoman Crockett, you have 60 seconds. Jackson leans forward, lips curling into something between amusement and dismissal. "Let's see if she can manage it," he mutters. Just loud enough for the microphones to catch. A few nervous laughs scatter through the room. The clock begins to tick. She opens her mouth, and he cuts her off. Once, then again. The arrogance is palpable, a performance for the cameras. He's not asking for an answer, he's daring her to lose composure. The narrator's voice slides in, low and deliberate. She had 1 minute to answer. But what happened in the next 3 changed everything. A pen clicks. Someone coughs. The tension becomes audible. Jasmine exhales once, slow and steady. Her calm now feels like a loaded weapon. And then she begins. The tone isn't defensive. It's deliberate, controlled, surgical. The first line lands like a quiet earthquake measured. Undeniable, the room straightens. Even Jackson blinks. Something in the air shifts. This wasn't just another hearing. It was a stage where ideology, ego, and identity collided under fluorescent light. To the untrained eye, it looked procedural. But to millions watching, it was symbolic, a reflection of who gets to speak and who's told to stop talking. Justice Jackson had built a reputation on intellect sharpened into spectacle. What began as scholarship had become showmanship, and every question was now a chance to dominate. To remind the room who held the gavel. That day, his target wasn't just another witness. It was Jasmine Crockett, a woman whose poise had unsettled. More than one man who mistook calm for weakness. From the moment she took her seat, the dynamic was electric. His tone clipped and deliberate. Hers, steady and unreadable. The air hummed with something unspoken, gender tension disguised as debate. Entitlement disguised as authority. He didn't just challenge her views. He challenged her right to sit there with confidence. And that's what made this moment bigger than politics. For viewers across the country, women, immigrants, young activists, it was more than a clash of opinions. It was a battle between two visions of America, one clinging to control, the other daring to redefine it. The silence before her response wasn't emptiness. It was anticipation, the kind that carries generations of unheard voices waiting to speak through her. Every glance, every micro-expression, every click of the pen became part of the story. Because everyone knew this wasn't just about a question. It was about who gets to finish their sentence. Justice Jackson's ascent had once been the kind of story America loved to celebrate, the prodigy who outworked everyone. The scholar who out-targeted professors before he even graduated. Law reviews printed his theories like gospel. Colleagues called him unflinching. He called it clarity. But somewhere between ambition and applause, something shifted. Clarity hardened into certainty. Certainty into arrogance. His courtrooms became theaters. The gavel, once a symbol of order, became his spotlight. Clips tell the tale better than any biography. Jackson leaning back in his chair, smirking as he slices through witnesses mid-sentence. Interruptions became his punctuation. His tone, a cocktail of intellect and ego, commanded silence, but never respect. For years, that strategy worked. Networks replayed his takedowns like highlight reels. Commentators called him a master of control. But control, when built on dominance, is always temporary. Inside his chambers, aides spoke in whispers. Deadlines were sacred. Mistakes were unforgivable. One former clerk described it best. Working for him felt like standing in front of a volcano that never erupted, but always trembled. He believed he was the standard, the sharpest mind, the loudest authority. Yet beneath the robe and rhetoric, cracks had started to show. Cases overturned. Public trust waning. His reputation no longer a monument, but a mirror reflecting his own insecurities. By the time he faced Jasmine Crockett, Jackson wasn't defending law, he was defending ego. And he saw in her something that unnerved him: grace under pressure. She didn't play his game, didn't flinch under his tone. That composure, quiet, unbothered, deeply rooted, was his undoing before the first word left her mouth. Because arrogance thrives in chaos. It feeds on reaction. And Crockett's refusal to give him one was the beginning of his unraveling. The cameras caught every moment, the faint twitch of irritation as she stayed silent, the flash of disbelief that his usual tactics weren't landing. He had built a career on control, but in that room, control was slipping, not in a blaze of defiance, but in a whisper of calm. That's the tragedy of hubris. It doesn't collapse in fire. It dissolves in silence. Justice Jackson had no idea that this hearing routine, procedural, forgettable, would become the day his performance turned against him. The day composure exposed ego. Jasmine Crockett's story doesn't begin under marble ceilings or polished spotlights. It begins in the heat of Texas courtrooms, where justice was never guaranteed and composure was often mistaken for surrender. Long before she sat behind a congressional desk, she stood beside those the system forgot: young black men accused without proof, single mothers fighting to keep their homes, citizens whose voices barely reached the back of the courtroom there. She learned what real power sounded like: calm persistence. Every motion filed, every objection overruled, every sigh from a judge who doubted her, they all shaped her into something rarer than ambition. They made her unshakable. Her voice wasn't built in ivory towers. It was forged between hard benches and harder truths. Each defeat taught her to listen longer, to wait for the moment when patience becomes strategy. Because she realized early, silence isn't surrender, it's setup. Colleagues remember her first major defense case, when a prosecutor tried to rattle her with sarcasm. She didn't blink. She waited. And when she finally spoke, her words dismantled his argument piece by piece until even the judge leaned forward. That's when her mentor whispered, "She's the storm you never see coming." When she entered Congress, the same story repeated: new chamber, same underestimation. Commentators said she was too outspoken. Critics called her unpolished. Jasmine never aimed to fit the frame. She aimed to redefine it. Her strength wasn't in spectacle. It was in stillness, the kind of stillness that makes arrogance nervous. While others performed for cameras, she prepared for moments. Every insult, every dismissal, became quiet ammunition. Every time they tried to talk over her, she learned how to make silence speak louder. That's why, when she faced Justice Jackson, she didn't come armed with rehearsed talking points. She came armed with history of struggle, survival, and self-mastery. He walked in, expecting another politician to dominate. What he found instead was someone who didn't need the room's approval to own it, because Jasmine Crockett's strength wasn't about volume. It was about voltage, the slow, rising charge of composure that fills a room until even the loudest man realizes he's already lost. She knew that day would come. The moment when someone like Jackson would test her patience, her dignity, her control. And she welcomed it. Because every courtroom, every headline, every slight had prepared her for that one confrontation, not just to defend herself, but to show the nation what grace under pressure truly looks like. The hearing room feels less like a chamber of law and more like a stage wired for conflict. Cameras flash. Murmurs ripple. Justice Jackson leans in, his voice sharp, his rhythm rehearsed. He begins not with inquiry, but with accusation. "Tell me, Congresswoman, where exactly does your experience qualify you to make such claims?" His tone is deliberate, clipped, dismissive, almost amused. Each question lands like a jab, designed to corner, not to clarify. Crockett meets his gaze but says nothing. The silence unsettles him. He fills it with another barrage, faster this time. Interruptions. Half smiles. Theatrics dot across the table. Jasmine remains still, her hands folded, eyes steady. She lets his words echo, lets the arrogance hang heavy in the air. And then, when he finally pauses to breathe, she takes a single, slow inhale. The clock ticks. 1 second, 2, 3. That's when the shift begins. Her silence doesn't feel like submission. It feels like strategy. The crowd senses it. The committee members sense it. Even Jackson senses it. His smirk falters, just slightly, as if realizing the scene isn't unfolding according to script. Each interruption that follows lands weaker than the last. The power he thought he commanded begins to slip through his tone, his posture, his carefully curated confidence. Crockett finally leans forward, not in aggression, but in assertion. Her eyes lock on his, with the kind of calm that makes noise irrelevant. When she speaks, it's soft enough to draw everyone closer. "Are you finished, Justice?" The question isn't rhetorical. It's surgical. It slices the air clean. The murmurs stop. The cameras zoom in. Jackson's jaw tightens, but he nods, and then she begins, her voice steady, her cadence deliberate. Each sentence lands like truth long overdue. The silence stretches long enough to feel historic. Cameras capture every breath, every twitch, every ounce of tension waiting to explode. Jasmine Crockett doesn't rush to fill the void. She owns it. Then, with a calm that borders on poetic precision, she begins. "With all due respect, Justice Jackson." The room tilts. Her tone isn't defensive. It's deliberate, measured, carrying the weight of dignity honed through years of battles. She never asked for, but always faced head-on. "You asked what qualifies me," she continues, her gaze unbroken. "It's not titles. It's not privilege. It's showing up every day for people who don't get the luxury of power, but still deserve its protection." Her voice isn't rising, but the gravity of her words pulls every ear closer. Even the camera operators, trained to remain neutral, lean in without realizing it. She doesn't spar, she reframes. Each sentence reshapes the battlefield until Jackson's weapons sound childish in comparison. "I know some people mistake composure for weakness," she says. "But where I come from, restraint is power. Silence is survival. And clarity, that's what ends confusion." Her rhythm builds. It's not anger driving her, it's conviction. The kind that can't be rehearsed. The kind that comes from living it. She glances down for half a beat, then back up a small motion that feels like the entire room just inhaled together. "If defending truth is disruption," she says, "then I accept the title proudly." The words hang there crisp, final, undeniable. Even the air seems to pause. A reporter scribbles furiously. The stenographer hesitates, eyes wide. Jackson shifts in his chair, his smirk returning, but weaker now, forced. He tries to regain footing. "Well, Congresswoman, perhaps, but she doesn't stop. Not this time." Her voice cuts through his interruption like a clean blade. "You may not respect my position," she says evenly, "but you will remember my clarity." That single line detonates the tension. A few gasps ripple from the audience. One aide lowers his eyes, almost out of secondhand embarrassment. For a heartbeat, Jackson doesn't move. Then, the inevitable, the unraveling. He exhales sharply, mutters something inaudible, and pushes back his chair. The scrape of metal against marble echoes like punctuation on a lost argument. He stands, straightens his papers, fails to meet her gaze, then turns and walks out. The cameras flash like lightning. Reporters whisper in disbelief. The crowd, unsure whether to applaud or stay silent, sits suspended in awe. Jasmine doesn't flinch. She doesn't smile. She doesn't even look in his direction. She simply places her pen down, slow, deliberate, and glances toward the clock. 3 minutes. Exactly the same man who tried to limit her to 60 seconds. Couldn't last 180 that. Irony isn't lost on anyone in the room. One journalist leans toward another and murmurs that was the moment. And in that instant, Crockett's composure becomes legend, not because she shouted louder, but because she never needed to. The clip will play endlessly across feeds and screens. Dissected, celebrated, debated, but in that room, all that remained was the echo of her words and the image of a man undone by his own arrogance. It starts as a clip, 60 seconds of clarity. 3 minutes of unraveling, Uploaded by an intern who never expected it to break the internet? Within hours, it does. Crockett vs. Jackson trends before sunrise. By noon, it's number 60 seconds of truth. The video spreads across every timeline, every platform, to every screen that hungers for something real in an age of noise. Cable news picks it up first. The anchors can't look away. They play the footage in slow motion, freeze-framing the exact moment Jackson's expression shifts, confidence collapsing into disbelief. One host calls it the most graceful dismantling ever caught on camera. Another simply says, "That's not politics. That's poise." By evening, the story has morphed into a cultural event. Late-night comedians take their shots. One quips he lasted 3 minutes. That's about 2 minutes longer than his composure. The audience erupts. But underneath the laughter, the message resonates. This wasn't just entertainment, it was symbolic. On social media, the comments pour in like applause that never stops. She didn't raise her voice once, and still made him walk. This is what leadership looks like. She didn't win the argument, she redefined the standard. Clips of Jasmine's calm expression flood. TikTok edits sync to cinematic soundtracks. Reaction videos multiply. Lawyers, teachers, activists, even teenagers breaking down her every pause, every inflection, as if studying a masterclass in control. Meanwhile, Justice Jackson goes silent. His team issues no statement. No tweets, no interviews. His absence becomes its own headline. The man who couldn't handle a minute of truth. For a figure once addicted to attention, the quiet feels louder than any scandal. In contrast, Jasmine Crockett does what she's always done, stays composed. No victory lap, no smug interviews. When asked about the exchange, she simply says, "I said what needed to be said." Her restraint only amplifies the legend. Commentators start drawing parallels to historical figures, people who changed narratives not through volume, but through unshakable clarity. News outlets begin calling it the Crockett Principle. That power isn't proven by control, but by composure. The clip continues to spread across continents now, subtitled in different languages. Taught in classrooms as a lesson in rhetoric, grace, and gender dynamics under pressure. By the end of the week, even those who didn't follow politics know her name. Not because she shouted, but because she didn't have to. And through all the noise, Jasmine Crockett remains exactly as she was in that hearing, poised, grounded, unbreathed. When Jasmine Crockett finally addressed that moment, she didn't frame it as a triumph, but as a teaching. "We don't win by shouting louder," she said softly in an interview days later. "We win by standing taller." It wasn't a boast. It was a reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Her calm became a kind of compass in a world spinning faster by the day. Commentators called it composure under fire. Others simply called it grace. But to those who saw themselves in her silence, the women, the marginalized, the overlooked, it was something more personal. It was vindication. For every person who's ever been interrupted, dismissed, or underestimated, her 60 seconds weren't just a viral clip. They were proof. Proof that restraint can roar louder than rage. That silence, when wielded with intent, isn't surrender, it's strategy. Her poise reframed the idea of power itself. It wasn't about dominance. It was about discipline. About knowing when to speak and when to let arrogance expose itself. Justice. Jackson's meltdown faded into the digital archives of ego. But Crockett's words endured, replayed not as confrontation, but as counsel. Her exchange became more than a political flashpoint. It became a mirror reflecting how character is tested not by chaos, but by what we choose to become in the middle of it. Educators began using the clip in debate classes. Mentors quoted her line, "If defending truth is disruption, I accept the title proudly." Activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens found in her tone a lesson far greater than politics, that civility isn't weakness. And control isn't silence, it's self-mastery. And perhaps that's why her message traveled so far, because it wasn't about one woman or one man, but about the eternal duel between ego and integrity. Crockett showed that. Leadership isn't a performance, it's presence. That you can stand your ground without losing your grace. And in that hearing room, before millions of unseen witnesses, she didn't just win an argument. She reset the standard for how power should sound. The narrator's tone softens, carrying the weight of reflection and resolve in an era where outrage is currency. Jasmine Crockett reminded us, power doesn't need permission to be heard. What began as a 60-second limit became something far greater, a masterclass in grace under fire. While others saw confrontation, she delivered a lesson in control. Jackson's storm out wasn't her victory, it was his surrender. His fury exposed the fragility of power built on ego. Her calm revealed the endurance of strength built on purpose. As the clip replayed across screens, what lingered wasn't the noise, it was the silence that followed. That silence said everything. Her composure redefined what leadership can look like. Steady, principled, unbothered by spectacle. She showed that conviction doesn't need to compete with chaos, it simply has to outlast it. The narrator's voice lowers to a near whisper, because sometimes all it takes is 1 minute for truth to stand taller than pride. Then, a pause, the kind that invites reflection. If you believe in composure over chaos, in truth over theatrics, share this story. Because voices like hers don't just deserve to be heard. They deserve to echo, fade to black. A single caption appears across the screen.